Hello everybody and welcome to Diminishing Returns, the podcast where three film fans review a movie or series and then pitch own ideas for sequels to those films. Today we're discussing the Despicable Me series in anticipation of the latest installment. We tried to keep stupid accents and silly voices to a minimum, but this podcast does contain spoilers for Despicable Me, Despicable Me 2, Minions, and Planet of the Apes. Enjoy!
Ooby-doo banana. It's Diminishing Returns. Hello. We're doing
I thought we were going to do the whole thing in Minion speak.
I don't know how they talk enough.
Jabba, jabba, jo,
Spanish
si,
and Italian.
comprende.
Arriba. Banana. Oh. Should we do the whole episode like this?
No.
So today we are taking a break from our usual blockbuster films, I guess, to do the Despicable Me.
We're doing this art house independent films.
Yeah.
These billion-dollar films. Yeah. We're taking a pause from Blockbuster.
We're doing an animated film.
Which we've done before.
We haven't done one of those since Ghost in the Shell, and we haven't done a popular one since Finding Nemo. So
Frozen.
Oh shit! All right. We're doing a lowbrow animated film, which is probably the first time we've done that. So, Despicable Me, Minions, all that shit. So yeah, I'm Sol. With me are the two you've just been hearing chiming in and doing Minions impressions. The one doing impressions was Calvin.
Hello, banana.
And the one who doesn't do impressions because he's just too much of a grumpy Gru is Alan.
Hello, banana.
So
It's me, Gru. I think of that clip from Ellen.
Isn't Steve Carell the best? I love.
Do you
him
like
so
him? Do you like him as Gru?
I love Steve Carell. Oh, as Gru.
I like Steve Carell. I don't really think he's a great voice actor.
Yeah, he's not.
Actually, funnily enough, when I watched these, I thought it was a really good performance. I thought he's got a really sort of silly character voice, but it works. He was good acting, in what is required of a children's animated film.
Well, if we're going to jump right in to voice acting, I'd like to bring up the fact that these films are quite distinct from the majority of animated kids' fare that's made these days because of something that I think we touched on in the Finding Nemo episode way back when. But so many of the actors, big-name actors doing voices in these films, like, put on a voice and adopt a persona and actually do some, like, traditional cartoon voice acting, which is quite unusual. Like DreamWorks never really do that. I think Jack Black and Shark Tale, I pointed out last time, was the one instance I can think of it being done in the past. And yeah, in this film you've got Steve Carell doing a silly voice as Gru. You've got Steve Coogan as various people, just going back to his voiceover days. You've got Kristen Wiig doing a variety of people with slight voices put on. All the villains are people doing a voice. It's quite unusual for the
I
type
mean,
of
I'm kind
film
of with
that
you
it
until
is.
we get Sandra Bullock in Minions. I mean, we'll get
Russell
there.
Brand
But
playing an old man.
I can't stand it.
I thought Russell Brand was alright in this.
I mean,
as well.
no, but
It was terrible.
in terms of
even if you
of
didn't
the
like him, he was
performance.
doing a voice.
Yeah, he was doing it, but it wasn't good.
I mean, I agree. It's like Russell Brand
wrong with
sounds
it? I
like
thought
a
it was
young
fine.
man doing an old man's voice in that role.
Yeah.
It should have sounded older, but
I mean, yeah, but it just from a creative point of view, it's odd that they hired people to... John Hamm, even, in Minions, he was doing, like, a full-blown character and voice. It's just
He was
odd
great.
that that's...
oh yeah, it was Benjamin Bratt for me, because I didn't even realise it was him until I looked at the credits afterwards. because he was that was very much a character voice that I've never heard him do before.
So this franchise has sort of sprung up out of nowhere relatively quickly. Like in the past 7 years, like what, we're at film 4 in the franchise in 7 years, and one of the films made over $1 billion, and the one made 900 million.
It's not just the franchise; it's the studio behind it. Illumination, are they called?
Yes.
Illumination Studios. I mean, Despicable Me, I think, was their first feature. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah, yeah.
And they're a full blown, competitor to DreamWorks and Pixar and all of those guys now. They're one of the big animation studios. They released Sing last year, which I haven't seen, but they're branching out a little bit. I think they're quite financially successful, if nothing else.
And are we all agreed that a part of that is because I'm not sure if Gru is the reason, it's the Minions themselves, right?
Well,
like they are the breakout stars of this whole franchise.
In terms of merchandising, they are. Yeah.
I don't really understand the Minions because they're like what, like you see them everywhere now. Like you'll see a car parked with a Minion like bobblehead in it, and a Minion air freshener, and a Minion like tire flap or whatever, and. Like, do you think the people driving that car, for example, even though that like they're from Despicable Me, do you think they're aware of what these characters are to begin with, or do you think it's just kind of like Hello Kitty and people just like the look of these things?
Maybe to a point, but most of these people will have kids, and that's why they're aware of it.
Yeah.
And so the kids got the lunchbox and the whatever else kids have.
I bet you, if you asked a load of parents, I bet you a lot of them would think that the Minions movie was the start of it all, and wouldn't even know that Despicable Me was like anything to do with anything. But
I mean, even like 40-year-old people I have on my Facebook, they when they post their crap memes misattributing quotes to Elvis when it's actually Gandhi or something like that, and it's got a Minion next to it. It doesn't have Gru or Steve Carell.
Yeah. Okay, can we address that? Because I think I've seen Despicable Me years ago, but I watched them all this last week, and I included the Minions one, and so I wasn't really that familiar with what the Minions were. Like from my memory, they were the Oompa Loompas for the thing, right? So I didn't really get the whole put quotes on a picture of a Minion thing, and now I've watched them. I really don't understand it at all. I just wondered if you could explain it to me.
I don't think anyone understands it. I've read articles that have like tried to dig to the bottom of this and like done real in-depth research into like internet history, and none of them. It baffles everyone. Basically, all they can find is there was some quote Minion image a while ago posted to a page, and I don't know. People just started doing it, and just like it's just this weird thing that took off, and for whatever reason, something about the Minions. I suppose they're very visually striking and inoffensive, at least until you get sick of seeing them everywhere. Like that's the thing. Like I really do feel like the Minions have become an entity of their own at this point. Like far beyond what the Despicable Me franchise is. It's this separate thing of just Minions on everything. Minions on shampoo. Minions on breakfast cereal, Minions on mugs, Minions on ketchup.
Minions on the moon.
Minions on the moon.
How do we want to do this? Should we start with Despicable Me and talk about that in Despicable Me 2 before we get to Minions? Or
yeah, I think we'll stick with them
chronologically.
Okay.
Yeah,
because the Minions in the first film are really just comedy relief. They, like Alan said, they're the Oompa Loompas of this supervillain's lair, and they pop in every now and then for a bit of slapstick comedy or whatever. But that's kind of it. But the main story is about Gru, who's a supervillain, and
he wants to steal the moon, but it's more to prove that he's like the world's greatest villain or something. It's more of a weird emotional stake than a literal MacGuffin stake.
But he gets these 3 girls dropped on his doorstep, and he has to look after them. 3.
Well, no, he goes out and gets them.
Does he?
Yeah. It's not like he's like he didn't inherit them, and then he has to learn it.
he sees the value.
He
in
wants
their,
to use them for his nefarious schemes,
Yeah.
and then sort of falls in love
because his rival has got some like technology that he wants, and he can't go to this guy's house without getting shot on like approaching it. But these girls who sell Girl Scout cookies can go up to his door, and he buys cookies off them. So he sees it as like an inn. So.
And I will say that's it's a great concept. It's so simple,
Yeah,
and that's such a great like cartoon concept. Like, oh, I'm this villain, I can't get into this place, but the little girls can because they're selling cookies, and so I need to, adopt them. I think it's a really great concept. I think it works nicely, and I must admit, when I was watching these films, it was such a relief. Like I just watched all the Transformers films. What was before that? All the Pirates of the Caribbean films. It was so good to watch a 90-minute film that was really easy to watch, just nice and simple, funny, entertaining.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's been so good. That may have lifted my opinion of these films in general.
Well, I mean, you know what? I'm just going to come out and say it. Like, I really quite like the first Despicable Me. I think it's a great little animated film. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it does what it sets out to do very well. It's, just fun, entertaining. There's enough originality about it. There's some nice points where it actually does try and sort of step beyond what it could have just coasted on. For example, with what we were talking about with actors actually putting on weird voices, or some of the character design actually being interesting. The fact that you are rooting for the villain, and it does kind of embrace that more than a lot of similar films, such as Maleficent, we've complained about in the past, not just making the bad guy a good guy. And obviously Gru very much becomes a good guy in the course of the film, but it feels like a much more less contrived means of doing so. It just feels like, and at the end, it's not like he outright becomes a good guy. He's just kind of he's more morally ambiguous, I suppose, than you'd normally get in this sort of film. I guess that's what I'm getting at. He's nice to the kids.
I know what you mean. Yeah, it wasn't like
the
point of the journey wasn't that he becomes good and learns the error of his ways. In fact, he doesn't. He just fails at what he's trying to do. But because the heart of the story, the emotional storyline, is him kind of finding this other part of his life that he can feel proud about, or other avenues to feel love and affection, and to vindicate his life, rather than this villainy. And so he kind of turns away from that because he doesn't need it anymore. Rather than there's no moral questions ever really posed in this film. Yeah, which, like you say, it's quite nice just to keep that a bit different to how you normally expect it to play.
Should we talk about the cast a bit then? So obviously Steve Carell is the voice of Gru. So I mean, how do we feel he does? Because he is doing this kind of Dexter's laboratory kind of voice for the film, which I could see being quite grating for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was for me.
I liked it.
I was not a fan.
I think I think you can tell Steve Carell is like having a really good time. And I think that does inject something into the proceedings. Like, certainly I'd say there's more about his performance here than in a lot of other animated stuff that he's done. Over the Hedge, for example, he never really has much of a chance to, I don't know, just be Steve Carell. And so I think once you get past the fact that it is a bit weird and grating for him to be doing this silly accent, not to mention, I don't know, maybe how jarring it is for it to not be like an American protagonist amongst all these other American characters. I don't know. Once you get over that, I think there is a lot of, like, at the end of the day, I do think Steve Carell is a phenomenally talented actor, and I do think there's a lot of subtlety and nuance to his actual performance beyond the voice itself. I do think perhaps maybe the film would have benefited from casting someone else in the role, but I think he does a good job and kind of sells it regardless of that.
I think it's straight up a great performance. I think it does exactly what it needs to do. I think there's a lot of emotion in what he's doing, the performance, where it needs to be. I think it's spot on. I don't know what more you could want, really.
I find it grating, and I think it's just too obviously someone doing a silly voice. It doesn't feel natural. It feels like someone is doing a silly voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
And I mean that is one of the problems that I have with the films. Sort of fairly consistently, every now and then a character will pop up. So we mentioned Russell Brand before. He just really does stick out because again, it doesn't sound like a real voice. It sounds like someone putting on a voice that. It doesn't sound like a voice that would come from a man of that size or that guy's vocal cords, and it's very jarring.
Yeah, and I think you can tell. I think Steve Carell's having fun with it. I think he likes the character, and I don't know what the process behind the scenes was, but how much freedom they gave to him. But like you say about the voice, it feels like he's come in with that voice. And it's like Mike Myers doing Shrek.
Yeah, I was just about to point to Shrek.
Okay, we'll go with that. Cool, Steve, that's fine. I don't think anyone pitched it to him as, it'd be like a kind of vaguely Eastern European kind of voice.
I bet he was called Gru, and he was like, they said to him, like, he's a mad scientist or something.
He strikes me as
I bet he just
Dracula-esque kind of.
But that's it. I bet he looked at
kind
some
of
concept art of this pointed, villain character and just did a stupid voice and stuck with it. I mean,
got a great soundtrack as well. I don't think that can be undersold. I mean, Despicable Me 2 had the Pharrell Williams song "Happy." It was like nominated for an Oscar, and they've got I think they've got a really well choreographed, easy, mass appeal soundtrack that helps a lot.
Tell you what, Minions had a great soundtrack. I was really struck by that. That was full of great tracks from it's sort of period music, but yeah. That
Pharrell Williams song, "Happy," I remember that being all over the place when it was released. I didn't know it wasn't done for the film.
It kind of took on a life after the film for whatever reason.
Well, that's it. I didn't realise that it had been made for this film. So obviously, when I was watching that scene, and it was like, this music fits perfectly for this scene. That's really good scene. And then I realised that Pharrell Williams had done the music for them all, and like it was obviously all original stuff. And it is. That's a great little song. That. And
it's a brilliant song.
I think you're right. Having that kind of original music by this guy who's obviously a very talented writer really lifts it.
Yeah.
Rather than just having stock music that you're dropping in, or music with personality.
Yeah. So, how do we feel about the second one in relation to the first? Sort of said where we all quite like the first one.
I think the second one is sort of just everything wrong with sequels. It's just more of the same and just boring. And
I do agree. But at the same time, I just found it really watchable and simple.
I mean, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, so it was less focused. It had less of a sort of story to carry it through.
Well, it needed
a proper villain.
That's what I mean. It's partly they just couldn't really get away with doing the same. Like they had to evolve it to a degree to make it work, and therefore they go down this kind of. Gru's like a James Bond character now. He's recruited to this team to help out. I don't know, it's just kind of... And Minion fatigue had really started to kick in by the time I saw this one as well.
Actually, I watched the first one and I thought, I like the Minions. It's a nice concept. They've got a lot of character.
Yeah.
It works. I put in my notes, let's see how quickly these get annoying. And to be honest with you, I got through it. I was fine with them. I watched the Minion movie as well.
It's
not
the film's fault. It's the fact that they're just like all over Facebook being like,
well, I don't know if I'm that
having a cup of coffee first thing in the morning and stuff like that.
I don't know if I'm as affected by that in my life as you are. Apparently, I keep those people away.
I am. They really irritate
me. You can't go into a shop without being affronted by just bombarded with Minions and nonsense just everywhere you go. You go to the cinema to see other films, there's Minions everywhere, and all the fucking promo is like generally not to the same standard as the films as well. It's annoy me.
You mentioned Benjamin Bratt earlier, Alan.
Yeah.
Benjamin Bratt is not someone who I associate with being a sort of, a lively, fun character.
Exactly.
He's always kind of bland. Like, I probably best know him from Catwoman, where he's Halle Berry's sort of man to save in that film. He always pops up in these very bland sort of thriller action films.
Well, I've seen him do comedy.
Who he is?
I've seen him do comedy where he's like a little bit sort of silly, but he's always like not the straight man exactly, but he's not knowingly comedic, He's kind of the naive one or the silly one. Like in Demolition Man, for example, he's in that. He's in Miss Congeniality.
Oh, of course he is.
As the kind of the sexy one in that.
Yeah. But yeah, his character in here, I thought was really fun and great.
Yeah, I like I say, I had no idea it was him. But my problem with that character is that it's a big character, great, but we need to see him that he is the villain right at the beginning, and then we can have him as the villain, someone to face off against. That's what the film was really missing, because they're trying to find the villain. It's lost. It's got no nemesis. It's got no kind of push. So that sort of felt missing for me in the script.
Do you know that Al Pacino was originally the actor for this, and then he left due to creative differences? Wouldn't you just love to know what those creative differences were?
Yeah, especially to say they clearly gave the other actors so much freedom to do what they wanted. That is quite remarkable.
I would love to know what he wanted out of the roles that made them part ways. Yeah. And this is... Steve Coogan is in the second one first, isn't he? He's not in the first one, but he's... Yeah. Because he comes back for the Minions film, but different roles, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he's all over the trailer for the third one as well.
Ah. And Ken Jeong came back from the first. It is quite nice how they keep bringing back the same voice actors. I guess they must love working with them.
And that's it. That's part of what I was talking about before with how you get the same actors playing several people in most of the films as well. But also they come back, all these supporting people who weren't even playing a specific character that carries over. Like they brought Kristen Wiig back to play a completely new character in the second film, and just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, like you say, that first film kind of came out of nowhere. Was it done on the cheap in terms of, were they perhaps?
I think so. I think
in which case they might have been a
sort of film goes.
Yeah, relatively speaking.
But yeah, I think
when you look at their budgets, they're around $70 million ish. And if you looked at like a DreamWorks film or a Disney film, there'd be 100 plus, more than likely.
Yeah, exactly.
And like say, the first one was Illumination Entertainment, Illumination Studios, whatever they're called. I think that was their debut feature film, so they obviously had a lot riding on it as a studio that had been founded and was hoping to take off, and
which is maybe there was an element of, look, hey, you did right by us, we've got a much bigger budget now, we can pay you 4 times as much for a couple of days in the studio, come and get it done.
Maybe, but even then there's a lot of people introduced in the second one, which was no doubt a much bigger affair, who stick around for the Minions movie and seemingly the third one. So I don't know, I think it's partly just probably they're just embracing kind of cartoons, and I mean that's something that really struck me with the Minion movie, not to get too ahead of ourselves, was just how much it felt like a cartoon more than like animated film, like just the kind of stuff you watch on Saturday morning as a kid growing up. But yeah, back to the second one.
I mean, I'm not so sure how much there is for me left to say about it. It's just a classic case of diminishing returns. It's the same sort of thing, but not as good.
It just feels a bit tired. Most of the humour feels very laboured in the second one to me, and just a bit more like the whole thing's pandering to just less of a sincere product. The first one feels like, people having a laugh and making something. It feels more like they're making something for themselves in a lot of ways. I think more than a lot of these films do generally, and I think a lot of that's gone with the second one. It just feels like much more of a product.
I mean, I when I watched them, I was going to make notes, and I just found myself not making any notes. and it wasn't because there was nothing to kind of comment on. It just passed so easily, and it was just, and I didn't really feel the need to drag anything out of it. It was just what it was.
But yeah, they consciously decided to capitalize on the fact that everyone knows the Minions and maybe doesn't know Despicable Me that well with the follow-up film, and we got the
just
spin-off.
Just before we go on to it, there is something I want to raise about Despicable Me films, and this was my main kind of bugbear with them, which is, you're going to see me repeating things here that I've said about Disney, for example, but the message of the film, which in that first film, that message is the most important thing you can do with your life is have kids.
Yeah.
Because Gru is a failure, he's a bad person until he has kids. His mother isn't proud of him until he has kids. He's proud of him because he's got kids, not for anything he's actually done. And it gives his life meaning, it gives his life purpose.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
Yeah, I did pick up on that. I think you can read it like, you know, it's you can read it as being about just having other people in your life and you know, loving other people and that sort of thing. I don't think you have to read it as directly having children, but I do know what you mean, and I was aware of that when I watched it, or rewatched it rather.
And then the second one is about, okay, you need to be in love, you need to have a proper relationship, you need to get married. Those kids need a mother. Like it's all very much sort of maintaining this. Hey, look, this is the way we do everything. This is what society says you should do. Be the good guy. Get a normal job. Raise your kids right. You've got responsibilities now. Get a wife. It just doesn't sit well with me.
And yet you like the films anyway. I think that's quite.
Yeah,
I think that's quite a statement, though, to say that you might not necessarily agree with the morals of it, but.
Yeah. But that's it, because obviously I don't see anything wrong with having kids.
I do.
Well, maybe, but in this sense, in this sort of wholesome Americana sense, it's fine, and so it works as a plot, and it's kind of like, and as an emotional storyline, someone finding love is it works.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I will say is that
I just feel like this is really reinforcing these cultural norms.
No, you're right, but one thing I will say is that the idea that you have to have kids to give your life meaning is one thing, but it is pretty apparent that if you do have kids, it gives meaning to your otherwise worthless life. I know a lot of people who've got nothing going on in their lives, and then they have a kid, and suddenly it's like, oh, I'm a kid, oh, it's everything to me.
Well, that's why people have kids.
Yeah, so it's believable that, you know,
when you give up on your own life,
make
you have
himself
kids.
happy by having kids in that way. It's not an unbelievable arc for his character, and certainly in the first film.
And those are the kinds of parents that share Minion memes on Facebook. That's who they are.
They are.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Minions found cultural position and acceptance in the world, and so spin-off movie was the answer.
Yeah. And I remember when this came out, and I was just sick of the Minions at this point. They annoyed me so much, and it's not their fault. It's just they're on everything, and then reviews weren't great, so I just didn't bother with it. So I watched it like last night or the night before for this record, and I think I'm gonna have quite a controversial opinion here, because I actually really liked it, and I feel dirty saying that. But
I went into it. I was desperate to hate it.
Yeah.
And I didn't hate it. I didn't even... Did I even dislike it? I don't know if I liked it. I didn't like it. I didn't dislike it. It's just... It's there. It exists. I laughed once.
Like, it was this... Like I was alluding to before, it felt like a really high-quality Saturday morning cartoon. And just this breezy bit of fun.
It.
But with, like... I really clicked with the sense of humour. There was some really, like, dark edges to the humour in the film that I wasn't expecting. Stuff like when that scientist, voiced by Steve Coogan, kills his past self, and then they all just vanish, and there's just a man's corpse left on the floor. Like, stuff like that I thought was brilliant. And there's this... You know, they go to London, and it was one of these things where it just ticked so many boxes for me. You had this Minion, becoming a giant kaiju monster stomping through the streets of London at the end. You had Steve Coogan playing a mad old Cockney. Oh, like it just you had so much stuff there that just did it for me. And the soundtrack for this one really did stand out as being surprisingly like loads of songs I love, but then songs I didn't even know before that I was like, oh, what's this?
I thought the direction, the score itself has a nice, spy 60s vibe to it.
But also the animation and the direction as well went far above what I would expect from this sort of film.
I made a note that the animation seemed much more realistic than like this very cartoony of the Despicable Me world. This would seem much more like, in terms of not necessarily the character designs, but in terms of the background and all that, it felt so much more just realistic.
I mean, I just
to you. I mean, I'm not an animation expert, really.
I would guess that's to do with the budget, because they'll have had more people working on rendering the background that would otherwise be kind of, made a bit blurry and glossed over. But I don't know, just everything about it, like the opening sequence where you see these little, fish water things like clinging onto a bigger nasty fish, and I loved I wish the whole film had been them through time with Geoffrey Rush narrating it, to be honest. That whole opening montage of them with Count Dracula and the T-Rex.
I would have liked that. I would have liked the opening without a narration, though.
Yes, I agree. I do agree.
Much better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I was really looking forward to this as like I was kind of looking forward to it's a Minions thing, so I was thinking like, okay, well maybe it's going to be like a modern day silent movie, and there'll be sound effects and everything, but there won't be dialogue.
For the first 10 minutes or so, I was thinking, they actually fully going to embrace that. Interesting, but sadly they kind of
and then they
make it much more conventional. But to be honest, based on the trailer that I saw however many times at the cinema back in the day, like I thought it was going to be far less true to that than it was. It was surprising how much of just, like you say, silent movie kind of stuff there was in the film for me. It takes a good half hour at least for there to be a character who kind of consistently talks and brings.
I guess it's that family that they meet, the ones voiced by Michael Keaton, Alison Janney, the criminal family. They're sort of the first proper talky characters that they meet, who I really loved, by the way. I loved that whole detour with them and the robbing thing. But when they eventually meet, because I guess the star voice of the film is Sandra Bullock, and I think she's absolutely terrible, probably one of the worst voice performances I think I've ever heard in a big theatrical animated.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, it's very sort of bland, just Sandra Bullock voice, but I don't know if the performance.
How do you feel about her as an actor, just in general?
I like her. Okay. I like her a lot. I like Miss Congeniality, but her voice is so kind of flat, and it doesn't have much variation in it. And she can't do a voice, she's just doing her voice, and I don't think it matches with that character design. It's complete failure in all regards for me.
I do understand what you're saying. I don't think it bothered me as much.
That's the sort of thing that normally really does click with me and wind me up, and I'm very aware of it. And I didn't really have too much of an issue with it in this film. And there were points where I did pick up on the fact that her character was very, animated and very, emotive physically when she was talking. And I did sort of think, right, she's obviously not moving that much in the recording booth, so it feels a bit odd that her character's that the animators have gone to such lengths to kind of energize this character. But for the most part, I thought her voice sat okay with the character. I thought her performance was okay. I don't think she brought anything to the role particularly, but she didn't offend me in any real way.
I don't think it helps that everyone else is so good. Like John Hamm is brilliant.
Very true. Yeah.
Alison Janney, Steve Carell. Yeah,
well,
they're all really good.
Let's not forget Pierre Coffin, however you pronounce it, the director who voices the vast majority of the Minions themselves. I mean, he gives it's just noise, but he gives a pretty good performance of just noise, to be honest. There's a lot of variation within that.
Interestingly enough, I watched the first two films. I had the subtitles on when I was watching them, and in the first film,
your hearing starting to go. You're reaching that age.
In the first film, when they're talking, it says they speak gibberish. It speaks gibberish, grunting noise, groaning noise. In the second film, it says they speak Minionese. So by the second film, it had been established. And when they talk more, they do start pulling certain words in. There's definitely Italian in there. There's Spanish. There's some Indonesian.
Yeah.
And words that sort of sound enough like something that you get the impression of what's going on. They did put more life into those words. Which, like you say, it might have been better if, it was played more like a silent thing or an incomprehensible thing.
I know that they go to great lengths in the first half an hour or so to make it so that the main three minions that we follow, Kevin, Bob, and Stuart, they've all got their own sort of personality, but then it kind of disappears as the film goes on, and I just don't really like... Stuart is... Stuart's the musical one. He's got a little guitar, and you get the sense that he wants to be a big star and all that kind of stuff. And then another one's a bit incompetent. I want to say Bob is the incompetent one.
Yeah, but
Kevin is like the leader.
Like he's supposed to be like childlike, isn't he? He's more naive.
Yeah. And at first I was like, okay, well maybe this is going to lead to some interesting stuff later on. And it doesn't really. It doesn't. I thought they were doing that.
It just gave them enough personality so you could distinguish between them, and they're forming different actions. But yeah, it wasn't plot related, really, was it?
Yeah,
I must say I did prefer the first 15 minutes of the film when it was kind of like there's just 100 minions on screen at any given time, and you're just watching them like Lemmings, the old video game almost. Some of them were just dying, as far as you could tell, just like off screen, falling into chasms and stuff. And I like that. I like that the film was just so, just kind of glib and not scared to do that. Like I say, it had a surprisingly dark edge to it in some ways, and
I just didn't think the slapstick was very good. Like, I've seen much better slapsticking in short animation and Pixar films, and even the other Despicable Me films. I laughed once, and I'm not proud of it. And it's when the minions are getting off the tube on the underground.
Oh, they keep going, mind the gap, mind the gap. And
then one of the minions goes, "Mind the gap." It really made me smile.
That scene, actually, funnily enough, that scene reminded me of when you go on the tube and there's a load of French 14-year-olds who are on like a school trip, and you just think, oh, fucking hell, get to another carriage, Jesus Christ.
I don't think I laughed at any of the slapstick, but I did laugh out loud a few times, which is more than I'd get from your average film like this. I thought that there were jokes in here that were really funny. They just weren't the slapstick. Like I say, stuff like Steve Coogan's scientist character killing himself by mistake, I found really quite funny. I laughed when they stole a flower wreath from a funeral later on, and like just, that said like "sorry for your loss," and they crossed out "for your loss" so they could give the flowers to apologise. It was just stuff like that I found really quite amusing, and I agree the slapstick was pretty bog standard, but there was other stuff in there that worked for me. And there's something I'd like to ask actually, just out of interest. So this notion that whoever steals the crown is like the new king or queen. Where's that come from? Because that's Johnny English as well.
Oh, I have that in my notes. I was just like, this turns into Johnny English when it's at the coronation and the minions are coming in from above. Like, I was like, oh my god, this is just Johnny English now. And the music was sort of similar. Yeah.
But that's obviously not true. So where does that come from? Because
I don't know.
I'm assuming there's a myth of some kind that stems from. I don't know. I did like that. There's just the fictional sword from The Sword and the Stone just in the middle of London, and that's just real. That's all
just a
real.
Big sword and a stone.
I wasn't a huge fan of that.
It really annoyed me initially, but then when it became a huge factor in the plot, and there were just people on the news like, oh yeah, that myth that isn't true. Well, apparently someone's just done something with it. It just. Again, it kind of just clicked with my sense of humour how they kind of hand-waved it, and
Well, it's how they get the minions into Buckingham Palace, isn't it? Because it's because he pulls the sword from the stone that he gets made king, and then they give the monarchy to Scarlet.
Which does bring me up to follow up the complaints I made about Despicable Me. This film's all about not questioning your place in life, your station. Like the minions they're made to serve. That's their purpose. If they're not doing it, they can't even function. They get so depressed. And then even when Scarlet, the bad guy, turns on them, they're trying to make it up to her. And they're trying to give everything to her. The only time they actually fight back is when she literally tries to kill them. And then even when they succeed at the end, they just immediately find a new master and follow them. And I didn't like that either. I thought it should have been about like a minion breaking out from the group or something. I say, I'm not just a little yellow thing. It's like a civil rights movie. That's what it should be.
I know what you're saying, and I kind of agree with you. But on the other hand, what you just said was exactly what I was expecting, and that seems like such an obvious way to take the film. So I kind of liked that it embraced its darker edges that I've already like alluded to, and did just have these are just a weird species of like subservient, almost like parasitic, like symbiote creatures that rely on others to get by. And I don't know, I was quite pleased they didn't go down that route, just because, like I say, it seemed like such an obvious, that's what you do for the Minion spin-off. The Minions learn to, they unionize and rise up, and
and what about if they'd had it where, like, a film about this one minion, and then right at the end he speaks and like properly, and then in the sequel they start a war for the planet.
I'd enjoy that. Yeah, that would be very good.
Planet of the Minions.
I would like that a lot. Should we project forward to the third one a little bit?
Yes, where Steve Carell voices an extra character, Groot's brother, from what I understand from the trailer.
Yeah, and very weird addition to the cast, this one, Trey Parker.
Oh, I knew you'd really like that.
It's just weird. It's the Trey Parker, for those of you who don't know, he's, the driving force behind South Park. Him and Matt Stone are kind of the two behind it, but he's very much the guy behind it. Matt Stone's more of a supporting sidekick. He's never really been involved in a project outside of his own creations before. I think he popped up in a low-budget trauma horror movie at some point, which was more of just like, he probably owed them a favour because they put Cannibal the Musical out on DVD or whatever. But yeah, it's just really, really odd that he's in this film. And all I can think of, I assume it's because he's got a daughter who's like a big fan of the franchise, and he's,
of course,
I assume it's that classic doing it so you can take your kid to see it and be like, that's, daddy in that role or whatever. But
that wouldn't surprise me. But I mean, I think he's a great voice actor.
Well, he is. That's the thing.
He doesn't do more work. I guess it's by his own.
Yeah, that's the thing. He is. He's a very good voice actor, and he seems to have pulled a completely like new voice out of the bag for this role based on the few words he has. It's not like, anyone who watches South Park will know that every other incidental role just kind of talks like this, and they all sound pretty much the same because it's Trey Parker or Matt Stone just doing a silly voice. Oh, some of them talk a bit like this, and this one in Despicable Me, just, I don't know, it sounds like he's just been saving a voice to pull out at some point. I don't know. I think it might just be his normal speaking voice, to be honest. Would explain it, but
I'm talking about the performance as well as the voice.
Yeah,
I think I think it's one thing to have a good voice; it's another thing to actually be able to act
absolutely.
with it. And I think he really does act with it.
Yeah, he does.
Unlike Sandra Bullock. So sorry, I'll lay off. When we get to our miscongeniality episodes, which are coming never, I'll talk nice things about her then.
So that was that. What now? Do we do some pictures or something?
Yeah, shall we? Why not? Let's get right to it. Okay, well, Sol, why don't you go first?
Okay. All right, so it's called Despicable Us, my pitch.
Ah.
It's a live-action film. So Steve Carell and Kristen Wiig are doing like press junkets for Despicable Me 3. Just the tired old interviews, answering the same old questions again and again. The Minions keep coming up, and Steve smiles and he answers politely, but about how great it is that they've struck a chord with the public. But he's holding back a grimace. He just doesn't quite get it. He's actually a bit annoyed that the things have far surpassed Gru's popularity, to the point that most people probably don't even realise that they originate from the films that he, helped originate and bring to life in the first place. But, regardless, he's happy that his films are so successful, even if the cheap, tacky way that the Minions are just slapped on everything starting to, eat away at him a bit. So he makes his way to the airport. He's being sent to do another interview in character as Gru on Saturday Night Live, so he's going to go off to New York. And his PA has a personal emergency, so they can't come with him. But, Steve Carell's like...
Is personal emergency a euphemism?
No.
For an orgasm?
Is that a phrase?
I don't know, it is now. Personal crisis. No, his PA's got a problem. They can't go with him. But Steve Carell's a good guy. He's a good bloke. So he's like, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. Take some time if you need it. I'll handle myself. It's all right. I can get my own lunch. No, that's a euphemism.
I can get my own lunch. Oh no, I can handle it. Both.
Well, depends what he has for lunch.
Anyway, in the airport, he's irked by all these minions he's encountering. There's someone in a minion costume promoting Subway sandwiches or something, and they're just on everything in the duty free shop, and even the airport security have got minion phone cases and stuff. So he seeks some refuge in the first class lounge. And there's this high class businessman opposite him, and the guy's wearing a fucking Minions tie, and he gets so upset with that he leaves. And
I really like the idea.
He goes to a fast food place instead of hanging out.
So I thought where you were going with this when he was on the plane was he was going to look out and there'd be a minion on the wing.
There's a minion on the side of the plane. Oh, that would have been
There's
fantastic.
a minion on the wing.
That would have been brilliant. No, he goes to the fast food place. They're giving away Despicable Me toys. A parent and child are holding up the queue because they've been given a Gru instead of a Minion, and the kid doesn't want that, so that really upsets him. And he's had it. And he just, thankfully, the plane's boarding, so he just goes and gets on the plane. On board, there's Minions all over the onboard entertainment system. They're showing the Minion movie and a Minions cartoon series just on a loop, and so he just can't get away from it.
Is there a Minions cartoon series? Seems like there should be.
There's a series of short films, but I don't think there's a series. But I might be wrong.
Probably don't want to cheapen the brand.
Yeah.
You were being really complimentary about it. 20 minutes ago.
But they have put that fucking yellow thing on everything.
Yeah. God. It's like what it was like to live through Simpsons mania in the early 90s. Just all over again. Just yellow people on everything. Anyway, we carry on this way for much of the film. It seems like the Minions are just reaching increasingly horrific levels of commerce. Everything in every shop has a Minion on it. Every TV show is being replaced with Minion remakes. Like Frasier, there's a Minions Frasier coming out now. We're just it's just the original audio, but Minions animated over the top, and they've garbled up the audio recordings of Kelsey Grammer. So instead of going, "Oh damn," it's "Dude, oh we did," all the songs in the chart are now sung by Minions. No escaping them. So at the Saturday Night Live recording, Steve is ambushed by a sketch involving the Lonely Island dressed up as Minions. And after the show, he goes to visit Andy Samberg in his dressing room just to say hi. But Samberg's still head to toe dressed up as a minion, which makes Steve laugh. But then he kind of, voices his distaste for the things in a kind of jokey way. He just sort of goes, to be honest, I don't really like them that much. But it completely backfires as Samberg just becomes inexplicably violent. And in this blind rage, he just starts smashing things and screaming, and Steve has to rush away. So he gets into a taxi to take him home from the airport on his way home. And the taxi driver asks him how he cut his forehead, and he laughs and just sort of says, "Oh yeah, I told Andy Samberg that I think the Minions are being overused, but I'm not that into them." And he got really angry. And the taxi driver just goes like emotionless and cold. But I love the Minion, he says, and Steve is terrified. The Minion are love, the Minion are life. And in a split second, Carell realises that he has to get out of there, and he jumps from the taxi moments before it seemingly on purpose veers off the road and into a tree. And he staggers home injured to find his family and take them to safety. Everyone he passes loves the Minion, and it terrifies him. He gets home and he starts to pack his bags manically. "Steve, what's wrong?" "Pack your bags, Nancy, we've got to go." "What? Where? Why?" "I can't explain, we need to leave, now." Okay. "Wake the kids and get them to pack too. We'll have to go to the holiday home so that I can just figure out what's happening." And they leave in Steve's car, packed like to the brim with their things. "Dad, I'm tired. This is important. We have to go." "Why?" "Because." Then he hears a Minion noise repeating, and a chill goes down his spine, and he turns to see
banana.
Ooh. Yeah. He turns to see his son.
Chill down Steve Carell's back. I liked that.
Ooh. He turns to see his son playing Minion Mayhem on the 3DS, and
oh no!
He slams on the brakes and throws it out the window, and they drive on. "Dad, why did you do that?" "We'll get you another one. You don't need it now. Here, watch a movie or something." And he forces a tablet into the kid's hands, and they boot up Star Wars: The Force Awakens. The car zooms on. A good hour's pass, but then Steve catches sight of something on the screen. It's this hideous, realistic rendering of a Minion. Maz Kanata. No, the Minions. They've even infiltrated Star Wars. And it's enough to distract him, so that when he turns back, he's about to hit a strange-looking cat, and he swerves, tipping the car upside down. They all check that everyone's okay. They are. "Steve, what happened? Did you see that?" "What? That yellow cat, Steve?" And so anyway, they're marching on, and their home that they're heading to, this holiday home, it's just a few more miles from here, so not long now. The early morning light's beginning to break, and they make their way into some woods. "Come on, it's just on the other side of the woods," he says to his family as they trudge through the undergrowth. Nancy Carell and the kids fall slightly behind Steve. She tells them that she's worried about him, and they shouldn't spend any time with him without her there as well, because she starts to question his sanity. So she's going to look for a way to get a doctor or someone to come and visit them. And then off in the distance, "Me want banana!" "Get down!" "Dad? Quiet!" "Banana! Boopy droop dop!" And a group of 5 men walk past as Steve and his family are ducking down in a bush. The men are in bright yellow face paint and wearing bright blue swimming goggles and dungarees. And Nancy sees that something strange really is happening. "Oh my god." "I know." They carry on. There it is. Bidoo, bidoo. The house, it's surrounded by minions. They see them. Run. They run back into the woods, pursued by minion people. Normal minions, mime minions, cowboy minions, minions with empty mugs that want a cup of morning mud, coffee, whatever they call it. "We are Minion, for we are many," they chant. They're eventually able to shake them as they hide in a small cave that's in the the undergrowth. Yeah, I know where we can go. Steve Coogan has a place near here too. Maybe he'll be able to shed some light on what's happening. They make their way to his home, and Steve Carell climbs over his high walls and makes his way to the front door. He knocks and Steve answers. Steve, I'm so pleased to see you. Have you seen what's happening with the Minions? Steve Coogan goes dead-eyed and emotionless. His mouth opens wide and he lifts his arm to point at Carell. He turns to run around, but he's surrounded by the other Minions. They begin to move towards him menacingly. Then Carell has a thought. Hey Minions, it's me, Gru! I command you to do my bidding! And they stop in their tracks. Yes, I want to take over the world. I want you to help me. And the Minions lift him up and begin a procession with their master Gru. Then as they carry him, he sees his wife and kids in the crude Minion face paint. They've joined the ranks of the Minions. No! The Minions turn angry as his cover is blown. The Minions turn violent. The last thing he sees is a sea of yellow hands as the screen fades to black. Or perhaps the screen fades to yellow. A little bit of directorial.
Well, they all wear gloves. They wear black gloves.
But then we pick up in a hospital as Steve comes to. He's in a hospital bed with a drip feed and everything. He hears normal voices in the corridor. Oh, thank God! It was all a dream. He must have just been in a taxi crash or something, and he hallucinated everything. So he clambers out of bed and makes his way to a mirror. But then as he looks back, he's covered in bandages like that Twilight Zone episode, and he peels them off. And underneath the bandages, it's a fully formed CGI Minion, poorly stitched together over his body. It looks like the Minions gave him some sort of experimental surgery to turn him into an animated being and induct him into their Minion group. He screams, and a procession of other fully formed CGI Minions enter the room. Bobadoo, Bobadoo, Bobadoo! He runs outside, and it's basically like the end of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, where everything is an ape, but everything is now a CGI Minion. Mount Rushmore is Minions. That thing of Abe Lincoln is Minions. They're everywhere, and that's the end of the film.
I enjoyed that very much. I liked that. We haven't really touched on that awkward TV moment. Steve Carell did go on the Ellen DeGeneres show dressed as Gru. It was really weird, wasn't it?
It's my favourite thing. It's so good. Yeah.
Do you know what occurred to me then, Sol? I remember thinking when I was watching all the Minions that they did a good job of doing this kind of gibberish speak with lots of little foreign words and things like that and funny accents, without really doing a funny foreign accent that sounded racist.
Yeah.
You didn't achieve that. By the way, you just sounded like you were doing, oh, baba ding ding bum bum.
I was quite impressed by the Minions actually, because there were times when I was just like, this is getting a bit Middle Eastern, and then oh no wait, here we go, it's going French. Oh, it's like the change just enough that you never quite.
They are largely voiced by two Frenchmen, so I don't know what that factors into it, and a New Zealander in the original film as well.
And the guy who does it, Pierre Coffin, I read this thing that said his mother's Indonesian, and so there's a few Indonesian words in there as well. So I think that helps if you've got a wide range of languages to just drop things in.
So it's probably just his accent, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's probably just how he speaks.
That would be good if that's how he's directing the film.
You know what I really liked in the Minion movie is when they all had to put on a trench coat and pretend to be a human being. That's one of my favourite cliches, and I was just thinking how great it would be if it turned out Pierre Coffin was actually just three Minions in a trench coat directing feature films. Anyway, they're not real.
Shall I go ahead with mine?
Yeah, Calvin, what's your pitch for a Minion Despicable Me follow-up?
Well, I'm coming at this from the slapstick side of things. So obviously these are slapstick, silent slapstick comedy characters. When Chaplin had his day with the silent films and it was getting a bit old hat and all that kind of stuff, what did he do? He went political with it and tried to say something about the state of the world at the moment.
The Great Dictator starring Minions.
So
that would be
what we're gonna do.
Donald Minion.
No. We're gonna start with we're gonna open in Syria. And there's a minion.
Already, I'm nervous.
There's a minion who is a gay barber from Chechnya, and he's in Syria, and he's fighting the good fight on behalf of the Russian side. Good fight, as in terms of like what he perceives himself doing, not what I personally perceive it as. It's not a good thing by my standards. Anyway, so he's fighting in this thing, and we have some slapstick comedy where he's trying to load up.
Away. Sorry,
he's
my own joke.
Much like The Great Dictator, which starred Charlie Chaplin, we're going to open with this minion helping fight his side's fight, but he's trying to like put missiles in things, and it's missing, and he goes falling the other side, and he blows someone up, and it's like a lot of slapstick in that. But he actually ends up saving accidentally the life of a wounded pilot, and then is concussed and has to go and stay in a home for a couple of decades, after which he manages to escape and goes back to his old life, which is in Chechnya, for he is a gay barber working in Chechnya. Now, at the same time, there is a minion that looks exactly like him, who is also Vladimir Putin, who is in charge of Russia. So we have, it plays like how The Great Dictator does, where the politician minion is having these political battles and stuff with neighbouring countries and whatnot, and then the gay barber minion is facing prejudice and stuff. But the wounded pilot that he saved in the prelude, comes good and helps him get out of situations. He meets a woman. Oh no, he doesn't. He meets a bloke. Sorry. And, he meets another boy minion who he likes, and they
Your Lectron's heteronormativity just spilling out there.
Anyway, my film plays out pretty much like The Great Dictator does, and eventually the pair switch, the gay barber and Putin. And like how the end of The Great Dictator ends with Charlie Chaplin giving that really powerful speech?
It's that bit in Minionese?
No, actually, I just want to do that powerful speech. That's the first time that the minion's going to talk, and he's going to talk very eloquently, very beautifully, and just sum up the state of the world and prejudice and all that sort of thing.
You're going to do that overused joke where he takes to the podium and goes, pardon me. Ooh. Anyway.
Yes, we're definitely doing that.
Okay.
And we're going to end with, the soul of man has been given wings, and at last he is beginning to fly. He is flying into the rainbow, into the light of hope, into the future, the glorious future that belongs to you, to me, and to all of us.
To you, to me.
Well, that is probably the best puncturing of pomposity I've ever heard.
I don't want to go into the Chocolate Brothers too much, because I'm worried that'll be a death sentence for them. Every time we talk about an elderly celebrity and do impressions of them, they end up dying before the episode comes out. Anyway, Alan, what's your pitch? Are you gonna take? No, can I guess? Can we predict this?
You certainly can. Go on.
Okay, so Gru has...
This is a very Alan pitch.
Gru has
a good chance.
Gru has a midlife crisis. He realises that having kids was thrust upon him by outside forces, but it's not what he ever wanted to do. He always wanted to pursue his own villainy, working with other people, but not tied down by, relationships and what have you. And the Minions were always there as a kind of surrogate relationship anyway. They were, more casual friends that he'd hang out with, but he didn't take it home at night. He didn't, So...
Does one of the kids die of cholera?
I think it just opens with, did he marry that Lucy? Like,
Yeah.
right. They're getting a divorce. She's taking the kids with him, but he's secretly happy about it. But he doesn't want to let it on, and because now he's free to be himself again, and really just like do a bit of soul searching and figure out what he wants from life. His mum dies, so she's no longer like pointing him in the direction that she wants him to go. So he really is free to be his own man. But then he's still got all these minion things that look up to him, and he realises he's practically got like 100+ kids anyway, dependent on him. And he just gets on a rocket ship and just flies into space because he's had enough of it, and he just goes to get away from it all. And
No. This is Alan. There would be no rocket ship. There'd be like I don't know. He'd probably
just a car.
Just go to his shed at the back of the
go to the Yorkshire Dales.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he goes off to the Yorkshire Dales and just to find himself, and there's no Wi-Fi or anything. And when he's there, he meets a gruff Yorkshireman, voiced by Vince Vaughn, and this gruff Yorkshireman, he's old and decrepit. He's a shepherd actually, and he looks after sheep. And Gru sees a similarity between him and the minions, and the shepherd and his sheep, and he sort of connects with this old guy and the bond he has with his sheep, which is very, he cares for the sheep, but not really. Sheep are always falling in a stream and drowning, and it's not like he goes and saves them.
What's your emotional resolution?
No, just at the end. Well, that's it. He has a moment of clarity, and then he goes back and he cages the minions and just starts like harvesting them and selling minion burgers
for their wool.
Yeah. I ran out of steam near the end, but I think that's pretty spot on, really.
No.
No?
You're on the right lines there. Okay, so my pitch. First of all, we need to set up the main emotional storyline that's going to run through it. That is Dr. Nefario. He's got cancer. And he's dying. So because he's spent his whole life creating crazy inventions and potions and things like that, he's got no money to speak of. He can't afford healthcare. So...
Oh, God. Here we go again.
So, Gru and the wife, they're helping him out as much as they can. They're having to put money into his healthcare. But this means they're having to tighten their belts. They can't take the kids out to fun fairs and all that sort of shit anymore. So, the kids... They don't know about the sick old man. They've not been told. So they just think their parents are being tight, being dicks to them. So so that's your first storyline. So then running concurrently with that storyline, we've got Gru. Now he's a good guy. He's working with the Anti-Villain League, whatever they were called, along with the wife. He starts to get no more about what's going on in the villain world. We could have like a montage of them capturing bad guys and all that sort of thing. Then he finds out about this secret filing cabinet. He's not allowed to see it. So obviously he decides he wants to. He sneaks in and he finds a dossier in there about a guy called Dr. Mangle. Okay, so it turns out Dr. Mangle is the head of a pharmaceutical company, and he patents important medical treatments and then charges exorbitant fees for people to use them. Now, Gru's been told he's not to do anything about this. He's not involved with this case, but he takes it upon himself to expose this villainous behaviour. So this is the action bit where he has to find proof of this bad guy doing bad things, and so he, that's your action bit, your comedy bit, your slapstick bit. So then he gathers evidence. He takes it back to his bosses. But they refuse to do anything about it. They say, stop snooping around. This has nothing to do with you. Keep your mouth shut. So he senses something is wrong. So he goes rogue. He anonymously delivers all this evidence to a journalist, some major newspaper, and the journalist publishes it all. It's a big expose. Dr. Mangle is arrested, and there's a huge publicity about it. So back to the girls. They've decided that they're going to do whatever they want, even if their parents won't pay for it, so they're going to run away. They soon find themselves lost on the street. Now, before Gru and the wife can find them, they get found by a clown named Uncle Walter, who says they can stay with him if they help him with his magic act. Kids love magic, right? And Uncle Walter, he takes a particular liking. Oh, God. Uncle Walter, he takes a particular liking to the middle one of the kids.
Oh, God.
And he starts to tell her...
I'm really scared where this is going.
He's telling her that she has a special skill for magic. And
no.
he wants to show her all his special magic tricks. But he can only show her, and it has to be their little secret.
Oh, no. Oh, stop. I want to get off.
Okay.
I thought mine was going to be the darkest one.
Don't worry.
Okay.
So, the other two, they sense that something's wrong here. They run back home for help. Gru and the wife, they come to the rescue. They turn up just in time, burst open the door, boom, and they're there. We see the scene. Uncle Walter, he's got the girl inside a box. He's about to cut her in half with a chainsaw. She's screaming. She's terrified. Gru comes in. He rescues her, and she seems okay. Like they've got there just in time, but she's not wearing a hat. Okay. Now this is just a metaphor for her having been exposed or violated in some way. But we get. But I very much want to get the impression that he's got there just in time. But she's been sort of like she's been tarnished by this experience, but not damaged.
Aww.
Okay. Now we have an emotional moment here. Gru, he admits to the girls what's been going on. You know, Dr. Nefario is sick, so they go and visit him in the hospital. And now they understand why they've had to make sacrifices for the good of their kindly old surrogate grandfather figure, or whatever he's supposed to be in the family. But just while they're at the hospital, a TV news report comes on, and they overhear it, saying that Dr. Mangle has been released. He's been acquitted of all charges, because the journalist who exposed him killed himself, leaving a note saying he'd faked the whole story. So, Gru knows this isn't true. He's outraged. He goes back to the Anti-Villain League. He demands to know what's going on. And then it's slowly explained to him that Dr. Mangle is the biggest single contributor to the party funds of the incumbent president. And the Anti-Villain League are a government-sanctioned body. They're an arm of the government. So they have to leave certain people alone. That's the way the world works. But Gru stands by his principles. He quits, walks away. He has to take temporary employment as a hotel concierge. He can no longer afford the medical care for Nefario. As soon as the money runs out, Nefario is dumped out of hospital. The family take him in. The Minions give him palliative care.
I forgot about
until
the
he finally
fucking Minions.
Yeah, I did as well. I've got a minute. The Minions give him palliative care until he finally succumbs to his illness and dies. At the funeral, the head of the Anti-Villain League, he comes and he says to Gru, look, you can have your job back, but you just need to know what the limits are. You need to do what you're told. You need to keep your mouth shut. And at first he refuses, but then the Undertaker hands him the bill for the funeral and he numbly agrees.
You love expensive funerals.
Have
you been stung by a funeral bill?
I've never had to pay for a funeral, and probably never will. So no. But you know, it's just one of those things that. But anyway, yeah. So and then we just have a little montage at the end of the film where we see Gru living out the rest of his days, just numbly living life.
Is it over the top of a new Pharrell Williams song?
I think REM, bit of REM on there. Yeah, and that's it. So I was trying to continue the idea of a social message, to know your place, and just to do what everyone expects you to do.
Just quickly, like going back to my pitch. Remember Maz Kanata or whatever she's called from Star Wars. That is a minion, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's that like? Why is there a minion in Star Wars?
Popular.
Just a big minion. It's weird. Alan, do you remember what I'm on about? Just Google Maz Kanata, Mazkanata.
Yeah, that's a Minion.
Thanks for listening to Diminishing Returns. If you enjoyed the show and want to support us, then please leave a positive review and rating for us on iTunes, and be sure to check out our still kind of new website, www.dimreturns.com, for more reviews, commentary and discussion from all us hosts on there.